Today we're going to have what you see here, Ethan, a very smart young man coming to us from Tel Aviv, who also writes great thought leadership pieces. You should all read them. It'll make you not only smart in terms of data, but also smart in terms of media, the world, location, etc. And then Dan Hyde, who, as I mentioned, has been a great DPAA blue chip member in good standing through a couple of companies, is also not only one of the bright fellows around, but one of the loveliest. And he's coming to us from Dallas, Texas, and he runs partnerships for Placer. And we're going to talk about the incredible data they collect for real estate, for digital out of home companies, location based, and basically connecting the digital world with the physical world. And why don't we move on there to our next slide, Dr. Producer? Okay, there we go. So join us tomorrow, whoever's in New York City. We're going to be at Assembly, which is, part of Stagwell Empire, now the seventh or eighth largest holdco in all of advertising. And Andrea runs Insight and Connections. And Sam, they're going to talk about Insights and their brands. And also Jim Wilson, who is the CEO of Talent for Americas, is going to talk about retail media and the power of digital out of home to drive retail media. Thank you, Blake. That's Blake Kelly, who's driving in the background. And then, oh my God, we have Christy Schlepp here. Amazing. Christy Schlepp, the president of ODN, runs an amazing agency. And Brian Pogis in the chat says, my dimples are eating lunch off video. Very good, Brian. I love that. By the way, all of you, please join us. Men are also welcome. September 19th, 11 a.m. Eastern, our continuing We Do series. We're going to have Christy Schlepp, who's here. I'm sorry, CEO of ODN. I called her president, sorry for the demotion, because she is one of the most amazing, smart, effusive leaders in the industry. And this is great. She's going to give us some inspirational talk before we do our interactive series, webinar, and workshops for women empowerment and digital out of home We Do. And then at our summit, we're going to have awards for We Do for all of our women leaders. And right on cue, Blake Kelly runs this. Look at the speakers we have for our summit this year. Leaders of ad spend, leaders of marketing. It's going to be a great day. We expect over 900 people again at Chelsea Piers, Pier 60 in New York City, October 10th. Be there or be square. It's going to be the big day. We start at breakfast at 8:30. We end with cocktails at about 8. It's a 12-hour day, but we'll feed you, and we have entertainment and bathrooms there. Do we have the entertainment here, Mr. Kelly?
We do not have a slide for it, but we are going to be joined by A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical.
Yes, it's going to be really amazing. We're going to open up with the actual Broadway performers singing some Neil Diamond stuff from the Broadway play, and then we're going to, at some time during the day, we're going to be singing all together Neil Diamond songs, such as Sweet Caroline. So make sure you're at the summit. It's going to be a big event. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Ethan. So thank you very much. They're going to present, tell you a little bit, then we'll have chats after. Make sure to have your questions in the chat, and I'll see you at the tail end, everybody.
Thank you so much, Barry, and thank you all so much for being here. What we're going to do today is quickly tell you just in a 1-minute intro about who Placer is, and then we're going to talk about our data, but through the lens of the way we love to discuss it, which is talking about the things that we're kind of seeing in the market and what their impact is specifically on retail and the wider kind of advertising community. For us, this is always a really big piece of the puzzle. We like kind of using the data to bring perspectives on the world. We think that's what gets us excited, and hopefully we'll do the same for you. And then if at any point you have questions, I guess the best way is just to put them in the chat, and we'll try to either get them in the middle. Feel free, either Barry or Jay, to like stop us and ask us those questions. We like when this is conversational, and we're happy to go totally off the rails as quickly as you'd like. So let's dive in. I'll give you a quick intro to who Placer is. So we're a location data company in the very simplest form. People vote with their feet. We're showing you how they vote across the United States every single day. We do that by observing a panel of tens of millions of devices. Very critically, it's all de-identified aggregate data. So we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. We're a privacy by design company. We're rooted in our infrastructure. We then analyze that data with machine learning and AI algorithms to make estimations on visits to retail locations all across the country. And we show that in everything from in a wealth of different reports within our platform on things like visit trends, true trade areas, void analysis, frequency, demographics, and a whole lot more. If anyone is interested, we're always happy to tell you more. There's also a free version of our product available at Placer.ai. But now we can kind of like talk through some of the things that we've been seeing that have really been getting us excited. And I think one of the places that we really like to start, because I think it's the center point of so much of what we see in the offline world, is what's happening with the consumer. And there's a few kind of fundamental changes that we're seeing, and we'll run through a couple of those and we'll kind of discuss them. But the starting point is kind of where people are and how people work. So if we think about like where they are, we know that there's been shifts in migration patterns to different parts of the country. We know that we've seen a shift to the suburbs, very specific audiences from major urban areas to suburban areas. This isn't the death of the city. It is very much an exchange of audiences, but that still changes the way we think about the world. And there's also been this very distinct shift in work, and that's the hybrid work model. And what we've seen over the last kind of year or so has been this change and this steady, recovery, but pretty plateauy in the way we look at it of how people go to work. And I mean, Dan, I know you and I have discussed this quite a bit, but these migration patterns have shifted and hybrid work is showing some real staying power. And this has an impact on the way consumers live, and then therefore needs to impact the way advertisers think.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about fundamentally, even if we talk about the death of office buildings and it was way overblown, and obviously people have changed how they work. And if you're only going in 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week, well, that's a 20% change in the daily ridership of subways. That also has impact to the office buildings themselves. That also has impacts to the businesses that support the office buildings in terms of restaurants, in terms of, the happy hours afterwards. So it has pretty large ramifications, even if it is only a 20% shift in what's taking place in terms of where people are working. And very similarly, when people are moving from, we had a vast exodus early on in COVID, and people were talking about the death of cities. Again, way overblown. A lot of people came back into the cities. Now, is that a change of how those people work? Absolutely. New York has a larger population now than it did before, but the demos are a little bit different. It's a little bit younger. The incomes are a little bit less. What does that mean in terms of what your advertising message should be? These are all things that this data and these insights can start providing to people in terms of how to market to these new changes.
Yeah, it also unlocks so many of the opportunities that we talk about when we think about things in the suburban environment. And something that we've discussed almost ad nauseum is so many of these changes are massive opportunities for those who embrace them. And even the idea of hybrid work's impact on people going to a coffee shop in their suburban area at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because they need to get out of their house that they've been working at for a few days, or what it means for the biggest shifts back to work have been Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and what that means for weekends and the way we view a weekends, and kind of a Friday as our day to ease in and Monday as our day to slowly recover as we have to go back to work, and how that changes our mindsets. But I think one of the biggest things has also been kind of the way people shop. So was mentioned as one of the speakers talking about retail media. This is obviously a topic that you and I have talked about far more than that is probably healthy. But I think so much of our excitement around retail media is because of kind of this recognition of what discovery means in a retail environment and how that offers potential. How do you see kind of the shifting patterns of the visits themselves impacting kind of advertising strategy and specifically retail media?
No, I think it's a great question. I think very similarly, I mean, things I think from COVID were overblown in both directions, right? Death of cities, death of malls, death of different environments. But the other was that everybody was going to always just buy all the groceries now online. And we saw a huge shift of that, but we also saw a very big backtrack against that where people went back to going into grocery stores. Yes, we did see obviously a rise in e-commerce, but the use of these stores, we've never seen higher than we're seeing now. And when you start thinking about retail media and the opportunity that presents itself just to advertisers in general, a lot of that was really an e-com phenomenon. And now every major retailer is thinking about using the whole of their assets, which obviously includes their largest asset by volume and by dollars is their stores. And how do I utilize the whole of my store, the inside of my stores, the outside of my stores, this click and collect aspect? This is not going away. How do I merchandise on the outside of those stores? How do I understand kind of that whole consumer journey along that? So I think retail media and all its different incarnations of whether it's grocery, whether we're talking about home improvement, or even restaurants, which is not retail media, but it's an extension of that, and utilizing essentially the whole of these business assets, which obviously includes their physical assets.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point, and I think as we kind of transition, so we looked at kind of the consumer shifts, and I think that's something that's attracted a lot of our attention. But then also, obviously, retail has changed as well. And I think maybe the fundamental shift that we've seen as like when we think about pre-pandemic as a starting point, the dominant narrative was the retail apocalypse, right? In 2018, 2019, it was still alive and well. Stores are this kind of foregone conclusion that they're going to close and there's going to be this ongoing demise, and it's all going to be about e-commerce, and all people care about is convenience, and no one's ever going to go to a store again. Why would anyone ever want to get up and leave their couch if they can order things straight to their home? And then we had the pandemic, which was essentially, if you created something in a lab to shut down retail at that point, this would be your perfect kind of way to do it. And yet, not only did physical retail not go away, it rebounded stronger than ever. And I think part of it is, apropos, Dan, what you were just saying before, it was this recognition of the other value. So everything from buy online, pick up in store, from the critical importance of discovery within physical locations, and the experience that is so necessary to make many of these purchases happen. There is, I think, when you kind of dive into those elements, you recognize that there's this underlying ad value. And I think, take buy online, pick up in store. The future of buy online, pick up in store is how can it be leveraged to drive sales at the point of kind of pickup too? Because the negative of online is that you're focused in your shop. So you're less likely to be kind of, ooh, look at this exciting thing that I want to add to my basket. And I think all of these kind of fundamentals, discovery, BOPUS, they speak to an advertising opportunity, but it almost forces us to think a little differently about the stores themselves and the experience we're trying to create.
No, absolutely. And it's kind of like that in many ways, is that stumble upon, how do you happen across something new? And obviously, how do I start thinking about even merchandising in the physical store, where e-commerce has been over merchandised, you could argue, in many ways, and trying to predict what Ethan is going to want or what Barry is going to want based on what they've done before. And you kind of miss that happenstance. And the retail store is a great place to do that. And you see this as evidenced by what Nike is doing and what Lululemon is doing. They're creating experiences in those environments that allow them to build long-term relationships with their consumers. And obviously, in doing that, what do you want to put in front of them? It could be a merchandising aspect. It could be also just from a different type of ad unit in terms of trying to control that or experience that message with that consumer.
No, it's an important point. I think, and there's two things, and I'm going to lump these together because we probably did more content than we could fit into the time, because I mean we
usually do. It's okay.
We get excited about it. I apologize.
David tells great stories. It's great storytelling.
There's an element of experience I think is really exciting, and we've seen this from heavy utilization of pop-ups and the impact that they've made, and retailers that are oriented to experience, kind of like Ulta or Buff City Soap or the like. But then also, I think this fundamental element of discovery, which is so critical within the retail media conversation, because I think one of the things that, we think about online advertising within a retail perspective, we often talk about it as like the suggestions, the recommendations. Hey, you're looking for X, therefore I have a high degree of confidence you might also be interested in Y. Whereas there's this element of the in-store process that I think is oriented towards, hey, this thing that you didn't even consider, maybe you would want, or how do I get you excited? Because you're in a different mode where you're looking around and you're kind of involved in this world. I think so much, and Tim Rowe is here, and he was someone we had this conversation with on our retail media webinar, or virtual event a couple of months ago now. So much of it is about how do you embed it in a way that is kind to the consumer journey, that is embedded within it and not kind of too flashy, but at the same time catches your attention.
Yeah, well, it can't be a pop-up, right? At the end of the day, when you don't want to, and this is, I think, that balance that people have, particularly from a retail media perspective, you want to be additive to that shopping experience. You don't want to disrupt the shopping experience. It can't be seen as noise. So how do you do that? And again, trial and error is going to be a big part of this, and what's that right balance to do? And that's going to be different for different retail environments and different, obviously, content and messaging that you want to do. And there's not going to be a one size fits all. It's going to be very different based on the type of relationship that consumer has with that retailer and with that brand. So it is not going to be just a set it and forget it either. And that's going to have different geographic components as well. The audience to target is not all going to be the exact same based on different geographies either.
I mean, I agree with you. I think one of the elements that's super important is kind of taking a step back to understand the space. And so one of the things we look at a lot is the mall space. We were literally doing a webinar with the SVP of leasing for URW, who there's been talk of them selling all of their assets, and now they're not going to. They're going to keep a lot of the big ones, and they've been very innovative in the way they view kind of digital out of home and kind of retail media in general. And I think part of it is this understanding of retail spaces from a placemaking perspective. There is an understanding that it's not just about how do I get you to come in and buy products. It's how do I get you to come in and spend time? Because for some retailers, I'm less focused on sales within the store. I'm much more oriented towards brand experience. In some, I'm much more oriented to getting you to try something on, because there are cohorts that, the CEO of Allbirds said this. If someone who walks into a store and then goes online the basket size is 150% larger than if they go straight online. That's a significant difference and a draw of the store that doesn't end up going to the cashier. It goes somewhere else. And I think this recognition of the value of the place and the idea that so many mall owners especially are trying to get you to spend more time there, have a cup of coffee, get a meal afterwards. It speaks to a more holistic experience where the advertising can be more creative, it can be more impactful, it can be more long-term thinking.
Absolutely. And those types of environments, again, it's not a one size fits all with these things. The types of malls are changing as well. Again, the death of the mall has been way overblown for way too long a period of time. Just like the death of movies. And nobody's going to go into movie theaters anymore. We've obviously seen that not play out. I think we have some data on that as well. But the types of experiences are certainly going to change. But the key is, and I think you pointed out, people are spending more time there. What are the types of amenities that people want in malls? Then what does that create from an advertising perspective? Because you're in a different mindset. And if I can get you to spend more time there, your dwell time increases, then what types of offerings can you start providing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that so much of it is about challenging some of the norms. And we were talking, it's a Tuesday in September. We were talking football this morning, and one of the more interesting conversations we had earlier this year was with a team that has a very significant stadium, and we were saying to them, like, it feels like you kind of are in a box. Like every ad is for a Ford F-150 or a beer or this, and you recognize you have massive amounts of people that are there before and after a game. Where's the pop-up restaurant concept? Even just the food trucks. Where is the way that, from an advertising perspective, take a brand and allow them to do it cheaply because they're getting so much more out of it than just the product they're selling on premise. And I think the movie concept is so apt, especially when we saw the buzz that this one was able to create. I think there is this really powerful moment in time, especially, again, shout out to I hate kind of calling out your own data, but there's such a powerful opportunity with data to challenge norms and to say, actually, that way you were thinking is different. One of my favorites was, people were tailgating at Taylor Swift concerts. That's not a normal behavior. And any of those stadiums, to the extent it's so not a normal behavior that we thought we had a bug in our data. We had to literally talk to people on the ground and say, is what we're seeing correct? Because this seems nuts. And I think this ability to think differently about the world, it really has a powerful opportunity to rejuvenate the way I think a lot of companies think about out-of-home strategies.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point with things like, the football stadiums. Now we're in football season, hockey season's shortly coming up. So many advertisers or brands would kill to increase dwell time. And it's a wasted opportunity if you're not maximizing that. I even think about my own use case. Am I really going to go out, shout out Dallas Cowboys, great Monday night or Sunday night game. Sorry, Giants fans. But, me going to a football game, it's like a 6-hour thing if I'm going to go to Arlington Stadium. I'm there. Take advantage of me. What else can you give me while I'm there? Because do I really want to sit in traffic, headed back in? Or to your point, can there be a food truck? Can there be a pop-up that takes advantage of an audience that's there, that's voting with their feet, and give them a new experience? Because getting people to a place is the hard part. You have people literally coming for these tentpole events, whether it's a movie, whether it's a concert, whether it's a game. And how do I take advantage of that audience that's there?
And emotionally connected. Like,
Yeah.
I think one of the big, look, I went to the Barbie movie with my 11-year-old and my wife, and we dressed up in pink, and we go to the movie theater, and there was nothing going on. And it's like, am I in a vibe where I'm like, I'm ready to spend more because my daughter's so excited and I'm so excited and my wife is excited? Or we were talking before, taking my son to his first football game. I'm spending $10 on every bottle of water in South Florida heat. You're right. And I don't mind spending extra on the hat, and I don't mind spending extra on the experiences, because you're part of an experience. And I think maybe, like, and I apologize for taking up so much of the time, but if anyone has any questions, please let us know. I think the biggest takeaway is that I think the physical world is about experience, and it's about an energy and Dan, you said this before, it's about a relationship with retailers. It's about the discovery experience. It's something really special about that I don't know that we always get excited enough about. And it sometimes blocks the ability to recognize that, there is a massive opportunity to reach people in a really exciting state of mind through these channels.
Absolutely. And I'll go back to it. Data tells stories. And if you can find compelling stories to tell, then, whether you're selling ads, whether you're producing content, or whether you're building the screen inventory, at the end of the day, it's getting that right content to the right person, that right state of mind. It's no different than where it has been. But I think the point is that we're seeing changes in patterns of behavior, and how do you leverage it? And exploitation from a positive impact, not the negative connotation we sometimes think about it. So with that, Barry, I think if there's anyone that has any questions. And Barry, you're on mute.
God, you'd think I'd
There we
get
go.
that going by now. Thank you, Dan. Anybody put your questions into the chat. This is great. I tell you, every time I read one of Ethan's pieces or I listen to him, I learn something. And of course, Dan, great Q&A. I don't know why you guys aren't doing this on our summit stage. This Abbott and Costello routine is really pretty good.
Yeah,
we do
a dance live too. It's amazing.
Yeah, I want to see. Well, actually, since we have Broadway performers on stage, you could join us for that. Years ago at our summit, we had Ain't Too Proud, and the guys turned to me and said, "Do you have any soul?" I said, "I got some soul." I mean, I danced with them on stage. Look, you guys, you've got a lot of amazing information here, and I love some of the snippets that the takeaways. I mean, even at the end there, data tells stories. I mean, I'm a big believer in storytelling. And to that point, how can, say, media owners or retail media owners specifically utilize your data?
I mean, for me, it's understanding how do you identify the right places to bring your message and the right message for those places. And so there is this, I think, powerful, again, it's a stupid example, but let's think about, you and I decide, Dan and I decide as a part of our routine, hey, we're gonna launch a protein bar. It's gonna be a value-oriented protein bar. And CVS says, hey, do you want to promote this within our stores? And we're like, yeah, we would. I mean, what's the right way to choose those locations? Maybe we say this is our demographic. We think it's an 18 to 25-year-old male or female. But isn't a better way of segmenting saying, where do people go to Planet Fitnesses? So which locations have the highest cross shopping with a Planet Fitness? Because we know they care about fitness and we know they want value. Mm-hmm. So I think it's about identifying new ways to think about how do you segment and how do you identify those right messages to bring to those right audiences.
I like what you say too about being privacy compliant, which is so critical. We are a global organization, and as we all saw from Europe, more of a fastidious nature on privacy and data, which you guys have certainly embraced, being a global company yourself. Now we're finding the same thing with sustainability, which is going to be also a big theme of our summit coming from Europe. It's all coming here, everybody. And I see Mike Schott from Volta's on the call. You know, that they're doing great work in sustainability with their Volta charging stations. It seems that you've got all your privacy intact, no questions, no PII, I guess. So anybody using your data is going to be fully compliant as well. And then we have a question from Deacon, if you want to react to what I said.
Yeah, and that's really from the onset of where Placer began, because it was really focusing initially on the use case of commercial real estate. If you're JLL or CBRE or Cushman & Wakefield or Simon Properties, what is the ideal tenant to put in a shopping center or into a mall? So it was really about tenant selection. And then the other side of that coin, you're the retailer. Where am I looking to go and why? So it was about the place, not the person, from the very beginning. And obviously with GDPR and CCPA, which we're compliant out of the box for, because we don't have any PII at all in our system, including the mobile ad ID, even though the location data is coming from our own SDK, because we didn't want it. We didn't need it. It wasn't important to the core part of our business. And now media is all moving our direction because nobody wants PII-based solutions in their systems. So it's also why we're starting to focus now on the advertising and the media space. We didn't begin with that, but in many ways, this is where the market has moved to, and sometimes it's the right place at the right time.
So Deacon has a question. If I'm going to paraphrase, which something actually makes a lot of sense, is that not only can you tailor messaging by audience, but also tailor the creative, not only location, but since you have an understanding of audiences and location, creative can be tailored for the full customer journey. Can you also inform as to price points as well? Deacon's got big, large LEDs at malls and stadiums, and from Australia to America. So can this inform the creative that is needed as well?
Yeah, 100%. I think it should. I think so much of, I think it is really important to kind of call out something, which is, as a company, our level of expertise and familiarity within the advertising world as of 12 months ago was minimal. When we had folks like Dan join, it brought in a wealth of expertise that allowed us to say, oh, that's something that people would need. We could maybe we could help in this way. So there is this tremendous kind of learning process. And I know it's something we take a lot of, honestly, we take a lot of pride in, and something our CEO talks about quite a bit, which is we don't innovate, we listen. And by that, we mean, the advertising world, you have forgotten more about the advertising world than I have learned in the last few years. And our ability to work with customers to understand, what are the gaps? What are the things that you're seeing that we should be seeing? What's your wish list? It's helped us in retail. It's helped us with product companies. It's helped us in commercial real estate. And we think it's going to be a big part of how we build something really robust for the advertising community as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Dan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something, even from a screen perspective, because one of the things, and Ethan kind of touched on it, but I want to hone in on this point. Obviously, where you put, so the CVS example in terms of a power bar and which type of protein bar you want to have and cross-reference with Planet Fitness is a great example. But you could also say, if I'm looking at the stores that I have, if I'm looking at the shopping centers that I have, if I look at the sidewalks that I have access to, which one should I put digital screens in that are going to have the most bang for my buck? Screens are going everywhere. I'll give you an example. We were actually approached. So one of our customers is Nebraska Furniture Mart. They have a mixed-use development. I'm pointing out the window like you can see in the Colony, Texas. And they own the real estate, and they're also the developer. And it's a big mixed-use, development that has entertainment venues, shopping, restaurants, hotels, and BoldSight, which is another member of DPA. They were introduced to Placer by Nebraska Furniture Mart. They said, hey, we use this data to understand the tenants we want to put in here. You should use their data for understanding where you're going to put the screens, what content you're going to put on those screens, what advertising you're going to sell to those screens. So in many ways, when you start thinking about digitizing the physical world, data helps democratize what you should do and where you should do it, because you can't wave a magic wand and say, I'm going to put digital screens everywhere all at one time. But you start thinking about prioritizing these based on the prime locations, much like you would from a real estate perspective.
You make so many great points. Some of them are great sound bites. Data helps democratize, but in addition to that, I do love the fact you said that the basket increases 150% in store versus online.
So it's a quote from the CEO of Allbirds, and he was saying that someone
The
who
CEO
visits
of what?
Allbirds. The
Allbirds.
shoes,
Al-
Allbirds.
Yeah,
oh,
Allbirds.
he's
ALLBIRDS.
Allbirds.
Sorry,
Sorry,
my accent.
got it.
And then,
Right.
and he said, he was saying that someone who visits a store and then goes online spends 150% more than someone who buys online without the touch in the store. And the idea of, I think what he's indicating is that power of touch and feel, that power of falling in love with the brand, I mean, look, how much is Nike focusing on the experience within their stores? Lulu's the same, and there's many, many examples. Because when you fall in love with a brand, when you fall in love with the products, your likelihood to purchase online is increased, and it increases your lifetime value as well. There's many products. I mean, customers of ours in the kind of clothing space, their goal is to get you in there that one time, find you the right size, and then they know they're going to capitalize long-term online, as opposed to having to deal with costly returns when you buy it online and don't get the right size. So there's so many benefits, and it's about asking, what are the benefits I can get? And then once I understand what the consumer is looking to gain from that visit, there's such an advertising value that can be provided around it.
That's really powerful. So is that the figure from Allbirds, or is it a larger data set for that?
From Allbirds.
Okay, and that's interesting because they are very good at being online as well, and they grew up online. So the fact that they're saying it's more 50% when it's experiential.
It's the same reason that Warby Parker. It's the same reason Warby Parker is opening up stores. Same exact reason.
Yeah, there's so many of them. In fact, right here in Madison Avenue, there's 4 stores right next to each other that were digital natives first online. Rhone, RHONE is one. The Suit Place, and so we're seeing a lot of that movement from online to IRL. Any further questions for these fellows? Just plug it in, or at this point you can bat it out. We try to keep these to half an hour, but there's been some good dialogue since then. You want to just give your contact information and so people can reach out to you?
Sure, I'll plug it in. I'm going to plug in my email into the chat, and then the joy is that puts the website into the chat also if anyone's interested in taking a look. And then if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. We love having these conversations, and we really appreciate the chance to speak today.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to give people a few seconds to grab that. And this is excellent, folks. You did a great job. Look forward to seeing you and everybody at the summit. Actually, Blake, would you mind sending an invite to Ethan and Dan? We can just have a chat for 5 minutes on another Zoom line. Ethan and Dan, you got time for that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Blake will send that. Thank you, everybody who's joined us today. Appreciate it all.
Great. Everyone have a great day.